Hi, I'm Caroline Mitchell, Canine Behaviourist at Good Doggy. We talk an awful lot in dog behaviour training about the dog's kind of input into changing behaviour, but that's really only half of it. It's not just about the dog's performance, it's also about our own performance and our own mindset and how we feel about things. If we're in a very good mindset and we're feeling very positive, then we are much more likely to get the best out of our dogs that day, as opposed to when we feel quite negative, we are more likely then to not have a great training session. Very often my clients will forget all of the really good stuff that has happened between sessions, and I'll spend quite a lot of time trying to draw that out of them and try to help them remember all of their wins. And that's not a coincidence. Our brains are designed to focus on when things either go very wrong or they're very exciting. So our brains are looking for real emotional extremes in order that they can remember things and treat them as important. Things simple like, having a successful training session might not be comparatively as exciting as going on a roller coaster, or it might not be the same as being chased by somebody in the park. But it's really important we teach ourselves to remember this stuff, because otherwise we end up in a very negative way and we start to really focus on where things have gone wrong, and we forget that actually we are winning. This is a dangerous place to be, because once we start to really focus on the bad stuff, we start to feel like we're failing, and this is the point in which we are most likely to stop working on what we're doing and consider that it's a waste of our time. So if we can remember all the really good things, this is very, very helpful for us, and it's what keeps us motivated and keeps us working with our dogs. If you think you'll fail, you're probably right. And basically what this talks about, this is about the mindset that we're in whenever we approach a new task. Visualization is a really, really powerful tool. We don't need good or bad things to happen around us for us to be able to put ourselves into an emotional state. Watching movies, people that have things like PTSD, listening to songs, all of these things have the ability to trigger emotions in us, and that is because we can visualize internally things that are happening, and then our body starts to respond physically as if those things really were happening. So somebody that suffers with flashbacks, for example, if they're very traumatic flashbacks, then they will trigger the same physical response as if a person was in that situation. So maybe that person is visualizing the sound of gunshots or something around them, or somebody screaming, or a noise or something like that. Their body will then start to produce adrenaline, it'll go into fight or flight mode, and it'll prepare itself to defend itself against those things. In the same way that a happy song, maybe from our past, can trigger really happy thoughts and memories, and they make us feel warm and cozy and nice inside. So we don't actually need to be in bad situations in order to feel bad and prepare ourselves for bad things. But this isn't very helpful for us if we're going to go out and do some training with our dogs, because if you're in a mindset that believes that you're not winning, already you've prepared yourself, you've prepared your body for something that's not going to work. The more you think about that, the more you rehearse that in your brain, the more likely it is that that's actually going to happen. We can rehearse good things and bad things in our brain. Some people rehearse speeches in their brain, and that makes them better speech writers and speech makers. Some people can rehearse learning lines. Actors would do this, So rehearsing things in our mind is really, really important for helping us be better or worse at something, if that's the case. So if in your mind you're constantly thinking, oh, this isn't going to work, every time I can take my dog out he responds really badly, and then he barks and he shouts and it's really embarrassing, if that's the kind of thing, those thoughts are going through your head all the time, then you'll be defensive when you go out, and your dog will pick that up, and then he'll probably have a bad day. But when you've had good days and you're focusing in on those wins and how it feels to win, those days you're going to be much better, because you're thinking about all of the things that are working, you're thinking about things that that can be done. So you're in a much more positive mindset, and you're going to be rehearsing in your mind what it feels like to walk past a dog, or whatever it is that you're trying to teach them to do. Maybe you're trying to answer the front door or whatever. But if you can put yourself into that really positive mindset, then when you approach this new task, you'll be much, much more likely to succeed because your brain already thinks you can. So it's not thinking we can't do this, let's make ourselves defensive and responsive. It's going, this is going to be fine. We know what to do. We're quite relaxed and chilled. We've rehearsed this and it will be fine. So it can make a big difference to the response we get from our dog. We can't always just rely though on ourselves to be very positive and to keep putting ourselves into a positive mindset. We need to see the evidence of it. So whenever you're working with your dog over a long period of time over behavior problems, whether you're trying to solve anxiety or reactive behavior or whatever it is that you're trying to do, you must monitor your progress because you will need to see evidence of success in order for you to keep believing this stuff. So there's a few different ways that you can monitor your progress. One of them is I like a win jar, and basically this is just a jar and you're going to pop something in that jar every time your dog has a win. Could be a tiny pebble, could be a penny, anything like that. So it's quite visual. It's going to sit there in your house. You're going to be able to see it every time you go out for your walks, and when you come home you'll be able to pop all your pennies in. So if you're trying to get your dog to walk past another dog, perhaps when you're out on your walks, every time you successfully manage to do it, you get to put a penny in the jar. If you're trying to answer the front door calmly, every time your dog lets a visitor in and doesn't jump on them, a penny goes in the jar. If you're trying to leave your dog without them panicking and getting upset, maybe you're working on separation anxiety, every time you get out the door and back in again, a penny goes in the jar. Whatever you're working for, this works for it. So as soon as you've achieved what you want to achieve, no matter how much help you assisted your dog with, no matter how easy you made it for them, that stuff doesn't matter. What matters is that you've been able to achieve your goal one way or another. That dog that you passed, you might have been a quarter of a mile away. There could have been a whole football pitch between the two of you, but that wasn't always the case. And if that's the case today, and that's something that he couldn't have done once before, that deserves a penny in the jar. So next time you go for your walk, have a look at your jar before you leave the house, and every single one of those pennies or pebbles will remind you of all of the wins you've had in the past. It will remind you this is possible, and it will stop your brain from tricking you into thinking that what you're trying to do is hard. If you go for a walk with your dog and you try to help them with a behavior problem, you might succeed 10 times in a row. And then the 11th time is the time that it all goes wrong, it all falls apart, and it all feels very negative and horrible. That's the experience that you'll remember. And if you don't trick yourself back into remembering all the good stuff. 9 or 10 good experiences versus one bad one is a huge win. Your training is working, you are making progress. So we don't want to let our brains fall into this habit of thinking everything's going wrong all the time just because 10% or 5% of what we've been doing didn't work out how we wanted it to. If you don't like the idea of a penny jar, then 5-bar gates on a calendar can work very well. And some people just keeping a diary and just writing stuff down. Write down how you feel. Write down what worked, what was successful, all of that kind of stuff. So before you go out for your walk, you can really start to imagine how it feels. You can remind yourself how it felt last time when things were going really, really well for you. When we're working on behavior problems as well, we always tend to focus on the end goal. That's the big boss goal at the very end. So if you're trying to get your dog to walk near traffic calmly, you'll be thinking about the bus, which is probably the worst trigger, going fast, splashing water on everybody, all that kind of stuff. And you'll always be thinking, we haven't got past this bus, we can't get past this bus. But your dog might also be triggered by joggers and cyclists and people walking past. Maybe joggers going fast are different from joggers going slow. Maybe bikes coming from behind are different from bikes going ahead. But if we're focusing on that big end goal, the really hardest thing to achieve, then we're never going to notice all those other wins that are coming up in between. So, I mean, the whole time you've been doing your training, you might have been able to walk your dog past nice slow joggers that are coming towards you. You know, you might be able to get past some bikes, but you'll not feel like you're winning until you finish the goal that you've set. So I create a list. I call it my Trump list. And basically your list is your trigger broken down into as many steps as you can imagine into many different variations, and you start with the easiest at the bottom and you work your way up to the top. So for that dog that's trying to walk past traffic that's being triggered, the jogger that goes very slow might be less triggering than a bike that goes really fast. So you put the jogger at the bottom and then the bike goes next. Maybe a bike ringing his bell coming from behind is easier for your dog than a bus coming past. So bike goes below bus, and you'll be able to work out all of these steps and put them all together into your list. If you're working on separation anxiety, then your list will be more progressive in terms of time spent alone. But at the very bottom, maybe it's just enough that your dog can cope with you putting your shoes on and picking up your keys. If you're thinking, I can't go to the cinema and have dinner with my friends all the time, then it will feel like all the little baby steps in between. You won't notice any of those happening, and you'll start to feel like things aren't working because you haven't achieved that yet. But you will have achieved so much else that's needed to be achieved before you can get to your big goal. So for separation anxiety, your first step might be choosing keys on. Then the next thing might be opening the front door. And then the next thing might be stepping out of the front door and then closing it again and then counting to 10 and so on. And you'll then start to build up time. So instead of counting to 10 seconds, maybe you'll try half a minute. Then it'll go to a minute, then 5 minutes and 10, 20 and so on. So eventually that time becomes useful and you start to really feel like you're actually getting somewhere. But if you're only focusing on getting out for dinner with your friends and going to the cinema, then all of these other steps in the middle will get missed and you won't feel like you're winning. Maybe you're trying to work on loose lead training, and you're thinking, I can't walk the kids to school and back in under 20 minutes like I used to. You know, that's a big goal, but in between, maybe you can just get them to walk on a loose lead for 10 yards, you know, just a tiny little bit. Maybe actually even just loosening the lead off for a split second is an improvement at the start. So once they can do that, that's maybe step one. Maybe they can do it for 2 steps is step 2. Maybe you're just doing this outside the front of the house where it's really boring. Step 3 might be doing it where there's actual distractions, real smells, something new, that kind of thing. So you're breaking all of your training down into lots and lots of little steps and ordering them easiest to hard. And as you go through each one of these steps, you get to tick them off your list. So your list will get smaller, 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 and you get closer and closer and closer to your goal. But if you don't take the time to actually make this list, then it's not going to help you know where you are in the training process. And it's not going to give you a visual of where you've been and what you've achieved so far. So make yourself a trump list. So things won't always go really well for you. Sometimes they will go wrong, and we're not trying to pretend that it's always going to be wonderful, that if we can get into a perfect mindset and we can remind ourselves of all the great things that have happened, then somehow, you know, unicorns and rainbows are going to shine over us and we're going to have wonderful training sessions. That won't always happen. So what we can do is we can also do a pre-mortem. So a pre-mortem is basically before we go on our training session, we're going to remember things that have gone wrong in the past, and we are going to fix them in advance. So perhaps yesterday you went out for your training and you took the wrong lead, and that really affected what you were able to do. It meant you didn't have the control that you needed. So let's make sure you've got the right lead today. Maybe you wanted to train your dog near ducks, for example, but there weren't any ducks where you went. So let's get on Facebook and find out where are the ducks. Is there a park nearby that has ducks in it that you can walk past? Let's do some research and make sure that you've got the right thing going on. If you ran out of treats or time, let's fix that. You know, don't try and do training under pressure. If you have to get your kids to school, this is probably not the best time to do that. Maybe arrange for somebody else to pick the kids up, or do your training at a different time so that you can actually complete the training as much as you want. If you have to be somewhere at a certain time, or you know you're running out of treats, then the effort that you're going to put in with your dog is actually just going to get reduced, and you're going to lose patience with them. And that's not going to benefit you or your dog and their training. So whatever it is, the kind of stuff that might go wrong, let's think about it, let's make a plan for it, and let's try to make sure it doesn't happen. So before you go out for your walk tomorrow, or you go out for your training session, first fix everything in your pre-mortem. Make sure that that's all solid and that you have managed to get rid of most of the factors that you can possibly that might affect your training outcomes. Then check your diary and start looking at all the amazing things that you've achieved over the last week. Look at your trump list, look at your jar, relive all of those happy moments, plan to succeed, know what it feels like, remember how it feels to succeed. And if you're not sure what success is, actually this is quite important, because if you haven't made a proper plan with your dog, you don't know specifically what it is that you're trying to achieve with them. And that might sound a bit crazy, but actually a lot of people will go out and say, I just want my dog to be calm. But maybe that's not easy to define. So if this is something you're struggling with, define what success is. What exactly does your dog have to do in order to be able to win, in order for you to feel like you are winning? Now you know what that looks like. You know what you're trying to achieve. You're going to set your dog up to succeed. You're going to make it as easy as possible for them to make sure that they actually do what you need them to do. If you have to make lots and lots of space, the more space you can make, the more likely they are to succeed, the more likely they are to get a reward. And you know, rewarding in itself is boosting of confidence. So once you've rewarded your dog for something, they also start to believe they can achieve what you want. So make it as easy as you can. If space is not the thing, maybe you need to break it down into smaller steps. Maybe you need to go slower. Maybe you need to find a way of filtering the sound. Maybe there's a way of working just with the scent. Whatever it takes to help your dog, if you have to remove all the distractions or whatever, then do that so that you can start to succeed. Because once you've got the ball rolling of success, your dog will then actually start to want to achieve more. They'll start to want to get treats from you. But if it's too hard, then both of you will both feel that you're not getting anywhere. As I said, we're not in denial. I know that things can go wrong, and we shouldn't be ignoring negative things, even though we need to focus on the good stuff. The negative parts is what we learn from. This is how we learn what we can do better and how we can improve what we're doing. So when you've had a session that's gone wrong, go home and have a think about it. That's the time to start making notes, and that's the time to start thinking about what we might do next time that's different. That's our pre-mortem. We'll refer back to these notes tomorrow and see what could we have done differently. So if we ran out of time, should we have changed the time? Could we have gone somewhere else for better effect? Could the process have been simplified more? Was it too hard? Were there not enough dogs? Were there too many dogs? Were the dogs on leads? Whatever it is, as if there's too many distractions and things, we can use what went wrong to find new ways to help them succeed in their next session. Very often things have gone wrong because our dogs have gone over threshold, and that just basically means that whatever emotion is driving their behavior when you're working with them, that emotion has overwhelmed them and it has become more important. It's put them into their reactive brain and it's stopped them using their normal thinking brain. So when they're over threshold, we can't train them in that because it's the emotion that's become more important. So all you can do in those situations is wait for that to subside. So maybe when you're training with them and they've become overwhelmed, they've gone over threshold, did you take time and stop and let them settle? And you might have been able to finish the training off then. That might be something you could do in your pre-mortem plan. If you do fail, or if something goes wrong, or if they do get overwhelmed, what do we do next? So stopping and letting everything subside and letting everything settle before you then finish your training off might still give you opportunities to reward your dog for doing the right thing in the end. And that's really important too. Maybe they got overwhelmed because they were overtired, or maybe they got overwhelmed because there was just too many distractions. So these are the kind of things that you can make notes on and make a plan for to go into your pre-mortem for tomorrow's training session. So hopefully that's been useful. I'll make a video about specifics about what can go wrong and how best to kind of salvage bad training another time. But just for now, make plenty of notes about what went wrong and then try to plan next time to find ways around those things and make sure that next time your training is much more successful. But don't forget to remind yourself of all of those amazing wins, because as soon as you stop doing that, that's the point in which you start to think that your training is not working anymore, and you end up getting very close to that quitting point, which would be a terrible shame, because if you've come this far, you probably don't have to keep on going for too much longer. You just need to get past these little humps, and then you'll be on the winning streak. Hopefully that's helped you for now anyway. And I'll speak to you again soon. Take care. Bye bye.